right, thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Karen Gondoly, and I am the CEO and VP of Product Management at Leostream Corporation. I am pleased to be joined today for our next installment of Leostream in the Wild by Shawn Hall. He is an HPC systems administrator and has been a longtime user of Leostream. We've always had a great time working with him. So without further ado, let's start this conversation. Hi, Shawn.
Hi.
So Brett, let's start by kind of setting the stage. Tell me a little bit about the company that you were working for at the time and the types of problems that you were looking to solve with Leostream.
Yeah, so my previous employer was a major oil and gas company, and we had people around the world who needed to connect into a single location and had to do that via a graphical interface. So we had a VDI solution, and we needed a way to be able to coordinate users' connections into that VDI solution.
And you say they were pretty scattered around the world?
Yeah, the majority, we're in Houston, which is kind of the oil and gas capital of the U.S. And but there's people in Europe, some amount in Asia, and so I mean, at one point I drew out a map of all the different places people connected in from, and it just kind of spawned out from Houston, went to all the offices around the world.
Mm-hmm. And the data center was all kind of centralized in the Houston area.
Yeah, so there was a big compute and storage resource in Houston. So basically, everybody who needed to perform or to do simulations and do scientific work, they ended up needing to log into the systems in Houston. As a result, they needed, many of them needed to do visualization work and just have a consistent connection into the Houston data center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for those listening who may not know HPC, that's high performance computes, right? So these are pretty intense workloads that people are running along with pretty highly intense graphics to visualize them.
Yeah, terabytes of data that needs to be visualized, and the reason we headed in the VDI or virtual desktop infrastructure path in the first place is because it's a lot easier to move megabytes per second of pixels around the world than it is to move terabytes of raw data around the world.
Yeah, good point. So you brought Leostream in. Let's describe how you were using Leostream to help solve this problem.
So basically, we had a pool of different VDI systems, and we needed the naive way of handling those would be you'd assign one user to one VDI system, but then when that VDI system isn't in use, then it would kind of be a wasted resource. So we needed a way to have a pool of users and to have a pool of VDI resources and everybody to share them without stepping on each other's toes. And that's what Leostream did for us, was act as, I always called it a traffic cop of directing users onto those systems. And it's especially handy when you have a globally distributed group of users, because the people in Asia are online at a completely different time that the people in the US are online. So person A could be using the VDI system during the day, and then during the US day, and then during the US night, and then somebody in Asia could be using that same system as they time share the different systems.
Mm-hmm. And so your hosting platform, you said it was in Houston, but what did you build the solution using?
So it changed over time. I mean, we started off using VMware and RGS based systems, and then over time we transitioned to using Mech9 TGX on top of a Red Hat virtualization system. And we also added in over time our VNC based services as well to all be managed underneath the Leostream umbrella.
Awesome. And then, as kind of one of the things that we talk about at Leostream is how easy it is for you to migrate between these solutions. It seems like that was something that you leveraged and was very important for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was handy because as the pieces of the puzzle underneath Leostream changed around as we went from RGS to to TGX, or as we went from VMware to Rev, or as we added in our VNC servers. Leostream, that's one of Leostream's strengths, is the flexibility of it supports all of these different graphics protocols and virtualization platforms, and even cloud providers and things like that. So we just continued using Leostream as we had these different tools coming in and out, and just added and removed even generations of new hardware. We could roll those in and out, and it all just sat under the same umbrella. So from our users' perspective, they weren't having to like download a new application every time we added a new tool or new hardware. It just showed up as a different option in the Leostream interface they're already familiar with.
Yeah, and when we talked the other day, you mentioned your users, they had their machines, and you installed Leostream Connect, and they could just kind of simply click on it and off they went, right?
Yeah. The majority of our end users were Windows users, corporate environment, and so they could just install Leostream Connect, and we made it. We got to the point where it was pretty simple for most of them, because they could install Leostream Connect, and they use the client-side credential pass-through function to basically pick up their Windows password and send it along securely through the different authentication steps. So literally at one point, a user could double-click on the Leostream icon. They'd wait a dozen seconds or so for everything to spawn up, and without entering a password at all, they ended up into a TGX session, but it was all done securely under the covers as well.
And it was interesting to me because the authentication system that you were using is not one that we see really often. So describe that a little bit for me.
Yeah, so in large HPC centers, it's still somewhat common to find NIS, which is sort of an older authentication technology, but it scales pretty well. So within the HPC domain, we actually used NIS for authentication, but then outside in the corporate world, we used Active Directory, which is what the Windows machines use. So maybe it was just an odd circumstance, but it worked out very well, because we could actually the single solution spanned both our Active Directory and NIS domains. And we didn't have to do anything special to integrate those. It just happened to be that you could, because of these different authentication steps, they could just pass the password between the different domains, and it works seamlessly.
Oh, that's fantastic. Let's dig a little bit more into the different protocols you used, and specifically, were there use cases for a TGX versus VNC, and how did you set that up in Leostream?
Yeah, so some of it was driven by the types of machines that we had the protocols on, and some was driven by the protocol itself. So we found that we kind of classified TGX as our highest performance solution, because that's what it was made for, and that it was also made for long distance graphics. So folks in Europe and Asia, they frequently wanted to use TGX because the response time and the interaction that they got from it worked better than our other options. Whereas some of our Houston-based users that were across the street from the data center, they often used VNC, and they liked it because it's a fairly simple and stable platform in it, and because it's not as performant for 3D graphics, it didn't require as much compute power on their end, on their laptop, because it was just sending 2D images across the wire. So everybody kind of used the tool that worked best for them for the high-end 3D graphics, the TGX, and for maybe more text editing or code writing, they could use things like VNC. And the other factor was that just the way that VNC versus TGX works is TGX, there's one user who can log into one TGX server, and there is a sharing capability, but you don't but that's only if you're trying to work collaboratively. It's not multiple users logging to the same machine doing different things. So therefore, we had to virtualize our TGX systems and split them into 8 different VMs in our case. And so in the end, we resolved with smaller VMs. Now, those VMs were VMs, so therefore, if a user did something like use too much memory, they didn't hurt other users. So that was a great feature of the TGX systems. But then if they needed a ton of memory, then the VNC servers work well because we could pile dozens of TGX or of VNC users onto the same machine, and then they could all share the same system memory. So if somebody needed to do a particularly large memory workload, they can log into VNC and get 1.5 terabytes of memory and be able to do their visualization there. So had everything had its strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the way you described it to me the other day, it's like you're able to do this all in Leostream because you had multi-user centers for the VNC servers, and then just regular VMs inside Leostream for the TGX workstations.
Right.
And it sounded like the users, when they logged in, they were presented with the different systems and they could decide which one they needed to do, and they could mix and match the protocol based on which task they wanted to accomplish that day.
Yeah, everybody got the same. We had the capability to separate them out, but everybody in the environment got the same set of systems they could log into. So they'd open Leostream and they'd be presented with a handful of TGX systems, and the different TGX systems were based on the different VM sizes, the different ways we split up the physical hardware they were on. And then the VNC systems, those were the multi-user center where we could pile a dozen or so users onto the same physical machine, and those weren't virtualized. So every TGX and VNC users logged into Leostream and picked what they needed at the time. And we even had most users tended to just stick with one technology, but some knew the benefits of each and would go back and forth between each one depending on what they needed at the time.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit based on one note that I had from the other day, which was, we just released the first version of our RESTful API, but you're an API user from long ago, used our XML API. So let's talk a little bit about how you were using that and what usefulness you found out of that.
Yeah, so we ended up, we got to the point where, users wouldn't always clean up after themselves and they would leave sessions open. And on VNC, that's not a big deal because that's not preventing anybody from using the machines. But on TGX side, that is preventing somebody from using the VM. So we actually implemented some Python script that went out and would do this cleanup on our behalf, because I kind of got tired of having to go manually clean it up once a week or so. So I implemented this Python script and it would go do a whole lot of things and clean things up. But at a certain point I said, well, I want to be sure that Leostream is consistent with what the TGX thinks itself. And so that's where the Leostream API came in handy, is we could go query what users are assigned to what machines in Leostream and validate that the people who are assigned to those machines actually do have an active session on those machines. And not only validate, but if we found an inconsistency, we use the API to clean that up and to make sure that a machine isn't sitting there idle because Leostream thinks there's a user there, but there actually isn't. And so we could continue to expand that depending on what features the API had in it as well.
Right, that's awesome. I love to hear the things that people figure out how to do using the API, or obscure checkboxes I've even forgotten are in the product. So that's always
fun. There's the API testing function in there that was handy too, because normally you have to sit there and kind of iterate and trial and error, but there's the built-in API testing where you could enter a username and password, and then you hop into the API and you could basically interactively query the API. And so when you're first working with it, that came in handy for being able to build up the what your API commands needed to look like and what the data structures that you were getting back look like as well.
Mhm. You mentioned the collaboration capability that TGX
Mhm.
has. Were you using the Leostream invitation feature along with the collaboration, or were users actually even using the collaboration feature? I guess I should ask that first.
It was pretty rare for a collaboration to happen. I mean, I usually tried to advertise it to users and say, hey, this is really handy. But where it came in, it never really took off with our users, but it did come in handy, at least for me, because when a user said, hey, I'm having this trouble with my TGX session, then I said, what machine are you on? And then I said, okay, you're going to see a prompt in about 10 seconds, click accept. And so I'd log into their session. I could, and it's it was even better than a doing a Zoom screen share or something, because when I'm collaborating, I have the high performance of TGX to be able to get into their session and look at what they were doing and understand what problem they might have been facing. So we used it for that purpose and as like a sort of a tech support role, and that did come in handy. We never did get to the point of using it, of tying that back in with the Leostream collaboration function, just because if nobody was using it as a user, we never had a reason to go through setting that up.
Right. Next step, something for the future.
Yeah.
And just to talk about it, so you had remote users, they're coming in from all over the world. This environment is not a environment you built today. It's a previous environment. So it was kind of, I think, pre Leostream gateway, and then maybe we put the gateway out while you were working with this. So your remote users had VPNs in this case, right?
Yeah. So everybody relied on the corporate VPN, and in a perfect world, we wouldn't have had to do that. In a perfect world, we would have used the gateway, and I did spend some time at a certain point trying to figure out what all steps I would need to do to have some sort of gateway in place, because when you're relying on the corporate VPN, depending on the VPN technology, there can be a fair number of hops between you sitting at home during a pandemic trying to log in, and the particular technology we had, it was great for the particular VPN technology we had was great for web-based sort of transactional stuff, but for remote graphics streaming video, essentially it had too many hops in the middle, plus fact of having the entire company, tens of thousands of users all using these VPNs, you're fighting with a lot of traffic. So in a perfect world where digital security constraints weren't a major roadblock, I would have deployed the gateway, because that would have given our users a straighter shot into the systems, and improve their performance when working from home.
Something else for V2.
Yeah.
So I want to dig a little bit into the VNC connections, because you mentioned that there were considerations given to building your own tool instead of necessarily using Leostream for this. And I just want to kind of hear a little bit about the thought process that caused you to kind of not go that direction and wrap them into Leostream.
Yeah, so I mean, we actually did have a simple launcher because we used Leostream and TGX together for a while, and like I said, RGS before that, but at the same time, often a different kind of corner of our team, we were using VNC and had a in-house VNC launcher. And at a certain point, we talked about it and made the decision to go ahead and just roll our existing VNC user base underneath the Leostream umbrella. And we looked at that and we said, well, what are the pros and cons? Well, the pros to having your own launcher are you have complete control of it. But if you don't sit here and manage it actively, then your bespoke launcher falls out of favor after a while, because you have to care and feed for it and add new features and fix things with it. And we had, at that point, we'd been using Leostream for several years, and we said, well, we already we already have this tool, and in the big scheme of things, my time is better spent doing other things than trying to maintain a bespoke tool. And we should just pay Leostream some more for additional licenses to be able to use Leostream for our VNC connections than having to sit here and manage our own tool. And not only are we paying Leostream for support on the tool, and we're getting the tool that already exists, but then via that support payment, we're also getting access to new and improved features and functions. And one example was the gateway with the HTML5 VNC functionality. That was something that we were interested in even before the gateway announced that. And then when it did announce that, we were like, well, if we set up the gateway, we sort of get HTML5 VNC capability for free. Whereas if we were maintaining this whole thing ourselves, we'd have to figure out how to cobble that together ourselves. So, for me, it made sense that we should go and just use Leostream for that and get it all under one umbrella and have one tool to maintain, and one set of support folks to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's our job to write the code. You can just make your users happy. Awesome. So there was a lot going on in your environment. You had VMware moving to Red Hat, different protocols, NIS, lots going on. What were the challenges that you faced as you were setting this system up?
The challenge is usually just tying it all together, because once you have something up and running, you can maintain it. Occasionally you have to do software upgrades, but the challenge is usually we're just tying it all together, because when I sort of inherited our VDI environment when it was operating with RGS on VMware and Leostream on top of that. So then over time, for different reasons, we moved towards TGX on top of VNC. I mean, actually, on top of VNC, too many acronyms. We moved to using TGX on top of the VMware. So we went from RGS to TGX, and we were fairly early users of TGX. So, we had to figure out how do we get TGX to operate in our environment, work out bugs with the TGX team. So we made that step. And then at a certain point after that, then we swapped out VMware for Rev, and we were quite early adopters of that technology. Not the Rev itself, but the virtual GPU functionality that it was in a beta stage pre-GA when we started testing it. So, that pre-GA always means, some more fun bugs, but you also get a lot of attention from the, people who are trying to solve those bugs and get themselves to GA state. So, we adopted Rev during that process, and I think we had talked to Leostream even during that point, and there was, the timing worked out well, because there was question of, is Leostream going to drop support for Rev? And we came and talked to you guys and said, hey, we're actually starting to deploy a new Rev environment. And then we had continued Rev support. So
I remember those conversations.
Yeah, so that was, and that's the nice thing about working with a smaller company is that people actually listen and understand needs, and your ticket doesn't go into a bucket. And so yeah, I mean, we transitioned there, and then the third transition was bringing VNC under the fold, and we already had our VNC infrastructure, but then we had to figure out how to get Leostream to how to get it underneath the Leostream umbrella. And each of these steps, we'd run into some bugs, we'd run into some, there were certain things that we were doing non-standard things or non-standard functionality, and we'd say, hey, we're doing this weird thing you probably haven't seen before. Is there a way to do this in Leostream? And sometimes, we had to find a little hack. Sometimes it just worked out of the box. Sometimes we had to ask for a feature request, but every time we just continued along and managed to get it all tied together. So that was usually the highest touch portion, was making a significant change to the environment. Was let's go out and and make this change, and it's going to take some time. The less painful parts were just the standard upgrades, and especially on the Leostream side, I mean, some of the Rev and TGX upgrades, those were more involved because there's a lot of moving parts in there. But on the Leostream side, it got simpler as time went on, of just upload the upgrade file, and you had to do it during downtime, but just upload the upgrade file and click upgrade, and 10 minutes later is upgraded, and got fairly straightforward to do maintenance on our Leostream infrastructure.
Well, that's good to hear. So you touched upon your interactions with our support team, but it's one of the things we often hear is people like working with our support team. Do you have any comments on your interaction with support?
Yeah, I mean, we were happy with the entire stack of support, really, because from the bottom up, Red Hat's a bigger company, but Red Hat support is known for being good, and so there was several times I got myself backed into a corner, and Red Hat was able to help us out. And the TGX team, they were a small team, but we had really good productive conversations with them, and same with Leostream team of our tickets weren't going into some Leostream backlog, and it would have to go through 7 layers of support before it got somebody who understood what the problem was. We all the Leostream tickets, we'd get picked up by your friendly support folks, and if the support person didn't have some button for me to press, then they always go back to the developers and get the request properly prioritized. And so yeah, I mean, it as a system administrator, it's very helpful when you don't have to spend your time fighting with support to get something done. So we appreciate that the simplicity of working with all of the different support folks for our software stack.
Awesome. So here's a question I usually ask at the beginning and just kind of forgot. So we're going to ask it now.
Okay.
How did you find Leostream? I know I mentioned at the beginning that you were a longtime user. Can you go back and remember, how did you first hear about Leostream?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that. Like I said, I inherited our VEI stack from a previous team member, and then I believe the previous team member heard about Leostream from another team in the company. So it was really word of mouth within the company is how Leostream spread for us. And I don't know how the original person found it, but I when you search for a connection broker, there's only so many options that show up, and so I think for what we were doing, it became pretty obvious that your options are either write your own or use what Leostream is offering.
Mm-hmm. And that was a pretty powerful thing that you said to me the other day, was that really, if you want to have these hybrid environments of different virtualization layers, cloud, do easy migrations between them while having a seamless end user experience, what you said was there really is no other option. It's Leostream.
Yeah.
That's not me saying this, I swear. That was what you said the other day.
I did say that because I mean, I have to be diligent in my job, and we would on occasion see what options are out there, but unless you're using like a pre-canned solution from a company or from even a cloud provider, if you need to do something more unique than just a specific graphical toolkit and a specific environment, or if you want to do VNC and TGX, or you want to have multiple virtualization solution, or you want to do hybrid with a cloud-based solution and an on-prem, we always tried to look for, it's all in our business, in a system administrator business, it's good to have competition because that keeps people honest. But we looked and we're like, it's Leostream, or we write our own thing, which it wasn't a bad thing, because Leostream is honest even without clear
Thank you.
competition. So that we always had a good relationship. So it yeah, it's Leostream's uniquely positioned in the industry for this niche of what needs done in a VDI environment, that it's the option.
So listening to, you were an early adopter of Red Hat, early adopter of TGX. Sounds like you like to be pretty cutting edge and you're open to trying different technologies. But I want to talk about, there were clear business reasons that you went this route instead of just looking at a full stack, we'll stick with a VMware kind of solution. And can we talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, just in the high performance computing in general, people tend to be on the bleeding edge because you're for the core business of HPC, that's what you got to do to stay competitive. But yeah, I mean, when we went through the process, each step had a efficiency improvement of, we moved from VMware we moved from RGS to TGX in the first place because that had a performance improvement, and licensing was reasonable as well. Our users were definitely happier with TGX than they were with RGS at the time, and I'm sure that RGS has improved, but at the time there was a good improvement, so we went in that direction. And with VMware to Rev, we got a couple of improvements of, because at the time we wanted to move to something that was able to virtualize the GPUs, because the way that NVIDIA GPUs were being created was they were getting faster and faster, but the number of chips on the number of actual GPU chips on the cards weren't growing. So we couldn't continue to do GPU pass-through as we had been. We needed to virtualize the GPU. So we couldn't get away with using simpler versions of VMware. So we had to look into the more expensive VMware options. And then around that time, we had talked to our Red Hat reps and said, well, we're thinking we need to head in this direction. And they said, well, we're actually coming out with virtual GPU support in Rev. Cost is a good bit better, and you'll get good performance out of it too, and you'll have access to some pretty smart people at Red Hat to get you up and going. So we headed in that direction for cost reasons and performance, and it's familiar. We could manage Rev with some of the toolkits we were already using, and so yeah, each step was because we ran the costs on what does it look like to take a physical server and split it up into VMs, as opposed to like buying a pre-built solution, an entire VDI stack, or going to the cloud or something like that. And it was cost efficient. It was good performance. All of our data and servers were in an on-prem data center in Houston. So trying to move, it didn't make sense to move a VDI workload to the cloud, where a cloud is good because you can scale up and down at will. But what's the point of being able to scale up and down at will if your data's not near the VDI servers that you're talking to? So yeah, it made sense to kind of build our own bespoke solution and tie these pieces together and have control of the solution and be able to manage the direction that we wanted the solution to go in, as opposed to relying on the vendor of the white box solution to push the whole stack in the way that we wanted to.
And were there any big surprises along the way as you kind of put this solution together?
I guess the big surprise really isn't a surprise at all, depending on how you look at it. It's a matter of just we were honest with ourselves that it wasn't a it wasn't just a simple white box solution, because we were building it ourselves. We had a lot of moving parts between the hardware and the virtualization levels and the remote graphics tools, and then Leostream. But at a certain point, we had spent enough time building this up and building the toolkits around it that it worked well as a solution together, and everybody played nice. And the Leostream and TGX folks, especially, when something was changing, you guys would talk to each other and make sure that both the toolkits work together. And it wasn't a case of of the TGX folks talking to Leostream and say, hey, we need to change this to be able to integrate properly, and Leostream saying, no, we can't do that. I mean, you made sure that the whole stack worked well, and so maybe the surprise is that just despite the complexity, it was a nice solution that we could manage reasonably and have like a quarter or a half of an FTE manage it once it was up and running.
For those of us who don't know, what's FTE stand for?
Full-time employee.
Oh, okay. So, it's like, how did I not know that one?
I'm just throwing every acronym I can think of.
It's like, that's a display protocol I've never heard of.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously it took me time once, at each one of those major changes, like when we were getting Rev up and running, that took time to, work through the bugs and talk with the Red Hat folks and straighten that out. But once it was up and running, and especially once, we had some of the automation in place, it took a quarter or half of my time to help manage that environment and just, keep it running like a well-oiled machine.
It just ran, it just did its job, and then you could do yours.
Yeah, keeping the inertia going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Wasn't a problem.
One of the things that we hear a lot of people, once you're kind of into day two and everybody's just logging in and Leostream's just doing its job, it's logging a lot of information about who's using what. Did you do any like analysis of logs? Were you using Leostream at all to kind of track usage or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we paid attention to Leostream logs fairly often. I mean, I would typically for debugging and capacity planning purposes. So if somebody said I ran into some issue with my connection, then I'd hop into the Leostream logs and see exactly what steps happened, and then if I could see that they got through the Leostream connections correctly and it had handed off the baton to TGX, then I'd go into the TGX logs and look, and so the logs were helpful for kind of tracing what was happening in the environment. And side tangent of the feature where you could test a user's login, that also came quite handy, because Leostream's has a lot of bells and whistles, because there's a lot of different things you can do with it. And so if you could, the fact that you could test the login and basically simulate what the decision that the Leostream was making under the covers, that came in handy to be able to know what the user, I could tell. Basically the user could say like, oh, here's what I got offered, and I'd say I know, not only because of the logs, but then I could even predict what they were going to be offered by doing that simulation. But yeah, I mean, we use the logs for the testing, and then also the capacity planning for understanding what I guess what logs, or what number of licenses we needed for each level of software in the stack. Watching the trends of user usage over the past several months, for license capacity, for system capacity, seeing how heavily utilized our VDI systems were used. Are we using 50%? Are we using 80%? Are we going to need to add more servers to the pool here soon? And then also for it, probably one of the biggest things I used it for was maintenance planning, because we had twice a year maintenances, and so I needed to occasionally do TGX rev upgrades during those maintenances. So I would go in and say, well, okay, who has logged? I want to notify everybody who is a TGX user. So I'd go into Leostream, find everybody who had connected to the Leostream servers in the past 6 months, and then grab their information out of the system, convert those to emails, and then I could go ahead and email the trailing 6 months of users and say, hey, we're going to have a maintenance. I see that you've logged into TGX recently. Just want to let you know there's going to be some changes to the environment. And that came especially handy when we had VNC and TGX running side by side, because I could filter on those logs and target just the TGX users, just the VNC users, both. And, that having the single source of connection broker logs was handier than scraping TGX logs against many machines, which
Right.
I'm sure didn't go back that far in history either. They definitely didn't go 6 months. So that was kind of our source of historical information.
So here's another way that someone has used the product in ways I hadn't imagined.
We hadn't even talked about that one before. Yeah,
yeah, that's fantastic. So usually at this point, I ask someone, so what's next? What are you going to implement next in your Leostream environment? But sadly, you are not managing this Leostream environment anymore. So instead, I'll ask you, what do you miss about working with your Leostream environment or with the team?
I mean, I guess I have I don't know if you call it an indebtedness, but like, it was sort of my baby in a way, because I set it up. I'd worked with the whole stack for 5 or more years and kind of build it exactly how I wanted. And it was kind of one of my first projects where I just sort of had free reign, and I wasn't coming in and having to tweak something that somebody else set up. I built the entire stack from the ground up, tied it all together, put all the automation in, managed it the way I wanted. So it was nice being able to do that and to build the relationships with all the vendors, and to have that strong relationship with everybody. That's sort of what I miss, of being able to say that this is my baby, it works well.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say otherwise, because it's my baby. But yeah, no, it was nice to be able to have a complete solution. And we were proud of it too, because I mean, especially after the rev changes, I presented it, I think 3 or 4 different conferences, including at Red Hat Summit, and said, here's the sort of bespoke solution that we built. Here's how we built it. You can build it yourself. It's all tools that you can put together and make a pretty nice VDI stack out of it.
Well, hopefully your baby will have siblings someday and you'll get to use Leostream again. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I'm just going to wrap up really quick here. Hopefully, if I could just find my mouse. There we go. So again, Shawn, thank you so much. I always love hearing the different ways that people have used the product, and I always learn something on every one of these. If anyone else out there wants to give it a try, you can always contact us at sales@leostream.com. Thanks very much.